Lieutenant Kira Vex had seen many things during her 3 cycles as a medical officer aboard the Galactic Coalition vessel, Horizon's Edge. She had treated plasma burns that scorched through chitin, witnessed regeneration chambers work miracles on species with redundant organs, and even supervised the careful extraction of crystalline parasites from the delicate neural matrices of her Talarian crewmates. But nothing in her extensive training had prepared her for humans. The human in question, Sergeant James Torres, sat on the edge of the cargo bay platform with his right leg extended at an angle that made Kira's 3 stomachs churn. Through his torn uniform pants, she could see the unmistakable protrusion where his femur had snapped and pushed against the skin, creating a tent-like bulge that pulsed with each beat of his primitive single heart. The accident had been catastrophic. A loading crane malfunction had sent a 6-ton container of medical supplies crashing down onto the human during routine cargo operations. The rest of the crew had scattered, their superior reflexes carrying them to safety. Torres had not been so fortunate. The container had caught his leg and crushed it against the deck plating before the emergency systems could engage. Kira rushed forward with her medical kit, her thin fingers already reaching for the emergency stasis field generator. Stasis was protocol for traumatic injuries. It would freeze the damaged tissue and prevent further harm until they could reach the medical bay. Her people, the Velen, possessed fragile crystalline skeletal structures that shattered easily. Any significant break required immediate stasis and weeks of careful reconstruction in specialized chambers. "Stop," Torres said, his voice strained but firm. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his face had gone pale, but his dark eyes remained focused. "I can handle this." "Sergeant, you require immediate medical intervention," Kira said, her translator rendering her whistling clicks into standard coalition. "The damage to your skeletal structure is severe. Without stasis, the pain alone could send you into shock." Torres shook his head, then reached down toward his mangled leg. Kira watched in horror as his hands moved to grip his thigh just above the break point. His jaw clenched, muscles standing out in cords along his neck. "What are you doing?" Kira demanded, but Torres did not answer. Instead, he took a deep breath, held it, and then pulled. The sound that followed would haunt Kira's dreams for cycles to come. It was not a single noise, but a symphony of wrongness. The grinding of bone against bone, the wet sucking of displaced tissue, and beneath it all, the quiet pop as the fractured ends of the femur slid past each other. Torres made no sound, though every muscle in his body went rigid and tendons stood out like cables beneath his skin. Kira's vision began to darken at the edges. Her species had evolved on a low-gravity world, where falls were gentle and conflicts were resolved through chemical warfare rather than physical violence. The sight of deliberate, calculated trauma being inflicted, especially self-inflicted, triggered responses in her brain that she could not control, but she could not look away. Torres adjusted his grip, his breathing coming in short, controlled bursts. Then, with another pull and a twist of his torso, he aligned the broken ends of the bone. The bulge in his leg subsided as the femur slid back into approximate position. Blood seeped through his torn pants, but not the arterial spray Kira expected. Somehow, impossibly, the human had avoided severing his major blood vessels. "Medical tape," Torres gasped, his first acknowledgement of the pain that had to be screaming through every nerve. "In your kit. The reinforced kind." Kira's manipulator hands shook as she fumbled through her supplies. She found the bonding tape, designed to seal breaches in environmental suits, and held it out. Torres took it without a word of thanks. His focus absolute dot she watched, still frozen in shock, as he straightened his leg with minute adjustments, feeling along the bone with fingers that should not have had the precision required for such a task. His species lacked the specialized medical sensory organs that most coalition races possessed. Yet he worked with the confidence of a surgeon who had performed this procedure 1,000 times. Torres wrapped the bonding tape around his thigh in tight spirals, creating a makeshift splint that compressed the tissue and held the bone in alignment. Each wrap drew a hiss of breath between his clenched teeth, but his hands never wavered. "Sergeant," Kira managed, her voice barely above a whisper in her own language before the translator caught it. "This is not possible. The pain should have rendered you unconscious. The shock to your system should have triggered a cascade failure of your regulatory functions." Torres tied off the tape and finally looked up at her. His face was gray, and his pupils had dilated until his eyes looked black, but he smiled. The expression was tight and pained, but genuine. "Yeah," he said, "it hurts like hell. But I grew up on Earth's colony on Titan. Low gravity, high radiation, equipment failures every other week. You learn to deal with broken bones or you die. Simple as that." "But the pain," Kira insisted, feeling her legs begin to tremble beneath her. "How can you function through such trauma?" "Adrenaline helps," Torres said, reaching for the crutch that had fallen nearby during the accident. He pulled it over and used it to lever himself upright, keeping his weight off the injured leg. "And humans are stubborn. We have to be. Our homeworld tried to kill us for millions of years. Predators, disease, other humans, you name it. The ones who couldn't push through pain did not pass on their genes." Kira felt the cargo bay floor tilt beneath her. She had read the reports about human evolution, about the death world called Earth, where everything from the microorganisms to the weather patterns seemed designed to eliminate complex life. She had dismissed much of it as exaggeration, the kind of myth-making that newly inducted species often engaged in to seem more impressive. But this was no myth. This was a human who had just performed orthopedic surgery on himself, without anesthesia, without proper equipment, without even a moment of hesitation. "Your species is insane," she whispered. Torres laughed, though it came out more like a cough. "Maybe, but we are still here, are we not? That has to count for something." He took an experimental step with the crutch, testing his makeshift splint. Kira could see the sweat now flowing freely down his face, could hear the slight tremor in his breathing that suggested his body was finally beginning to process the trauma it had endured. But he remained upright, remained conscious, remained functional. "I need you to help me to the medical bay," Torres said, his voice now showing the strain he had been hiding. "This will hold for now, but I should probably let the actual doctors take a look before the bone starts healing wrong." Healing wrong. As if bone could heal without intervention, without regeneration chambers and cellular reconstruction. Kira's medical training warred with what she was witnessing. Human bones, she remembered from her briefings, did indeed heal themselves. Given time and basic stabilization, they would knit back together through a process that seemed almost magical to species who required technological assistance for such repairs. "Of course," Kira said, moving to support his weight on his injured side. Even now, after breaking his own leg and manually resetting it, Torres tried to minimize how much he leaned on her. His species' concept of not showing weakness ran deep. They made their way slowly across the cargo bay, Torres hobbling on his good leg and the crutch while Kira provided what stability she could. Around them, the other crew members who had witnessed the incident kept their distance, their expressions ranging from horror to awe. "Can I ask you something?" Kira said as they approached the corridor leading to the medical wing. "Sure. How many times have you done this before? Reset your own bones?" Torres was quiet for a moment, considering. "This is the third time for a major break. Had to reset fingers and toes a few more times. Dislocated my shoulder twice. You learn the anatomy real quick when you are the only medical option in a 3-day travel radius. 3 times. He had performed this barbaric self-surgery 3 times, and he spoke of it as casually as Kira might discuss a routine medical scan. They passed through the corridor doors, and Kira felt her legs finally give out. She managed to lower Torres against the wall before she collapsed, her vision tunneling to a point. The psychological shock of what she had witnessed finally overwhelmed her carefully maintained composure. The G? Last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was Torres, reaching out with concern on his face. This human who had just reset his own shattered femur, now worried about her well-being. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. When she woke in the medical bay an hour later, the first thing she did was request a transfer to a different ship. The second thing she did was write a detailed report, recommending that all Coalition medical personnel receive expanded training in human physiology and psychology. The third thing she did was visit Torres in his recovery bed. His leg was now properly set and healing, the doctors marveling at how accurately he had aligned the bone himself. He smiled when he saw her, that same tight expression from before. "Sorry I scared you," he said. Kira settled into the chair beside his bed, her limbs still feeling weak, but her mind clearer. "Your species will change everything," she said quietly. "The Coalition has never encountered anything like you." Torres shrugged. "We are just trying to get